Good morning. We'd like to call the Northwest Indiana Regional Plan Commission executive session to order. It is 9 a.m. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Hollenbeck, are there any new appointments?
As a matter of fact, we do have one new appointment this morning. It comes in from the town of Dyer. It is in proper form and pursuant to our statute. I'm happy to announce that Robert Starkey is now the representative of the town of Dyer. I don't believe he's made it this
He
morning,
is not here this morning,
but welcome in his absence.
I actually just got together with him earlier this week and filled him in on all things nursing.
Oh, no, he won't come.
So now he won't come.
Why did you do that?
That's where I went wrong.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Yes, since this is an executive board meeting, I will take the roll call of the executive board, which we have quorum, and then I will continue with the rest of the commission. Kyle Allen, Kevin Brightsky, Tom Dermody,
Present.
Denise Ebert,
Present.
Bill Emerson, Richard Hardaway,
Here.
Justin Keel,
Present.
Sue Lynch,
Here.
Wendy Miss,
Present.
Jim Pressel, Jim Tunn.
Present.
We have four, we have seven. We have six. Okay, continuing on. Dwayne Arndt, Jeanette Bass, Thomas Black, Robert Carnahan,
Here.
Bill Carroll, Tim Clayton, Anthony Copeland, Don Kraft,
Here.
Jocelyn Denham, Dinah Dumbris,
Present.
Robert Forster,
Here.
Connie Grammarosa, Tony Hendricks, Ellen Hunt, here. Jack Geralds, Jane Jordan, here. Scott Keenan, Peter Land, Robert LeMay, Tom McDermott, Lori Mercer, Edward Morales, Matt Murphy, Randall Niemeyer,
Present.
Dwayne Perry, David Peeler, Jerome Prince, Barb Regnitz, Lisa Rosenkrantz, Regina Riddell, Rick Reifa, Tom Schmidt, Brian Snedeker, Steve Stevar, Robert Starkey, Ronald Stone, Gerald Swets,
Present.
Sharon Zwido, here. George Topple,
Present.
John Yelkich. And there's an addition of 10, so we have 17 in total.
Thank you. We have no public comment this morning. At this time, we'll look for approval of the minutes of the executive board from July 20th, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion and second that we approve the minutes of the July 20th, 2023 minutes of the executive board. Is there any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. There's no report from the chair this morning. We'll look to the executive director at this time.
Thank you. The only item I have is on October 5th, which is not that far away. Welcome to fall, by the way. I can't believe how fast we're into fall already. October 5th, we will be having an electric vehicle boot camp here in this very room. Municipal implementation of electric vehicles, what you need to do for that. I think this is the third in our series of electric vehicle boot camp series in partnership with Drive Clean Indiana. So again, that will be on October 5th in this room at 9 a.m., 9 to noon. So if you have you yourselves or public works staff or anyone else that could avail themselves of that, we invite you to be here on that morning.
Thank you. Finance and Personnel Committee, Mrs. Miss.
Good morning, everyone. The Personnel and Finance Committee met this morning. We reviewed the financial reports, the bank reconciliations, and the claims registers for the months of June and July, for July and August of 2023. We found them all to be in good order, and we thanked Leah and her staff for their fine work. We have 2 action items for consideration today. Bless you. A request for the approval to execute an interlocal agreement between NERC and Michigan City for the Marquette Greenway project, and another interlocal agreement between NERC and the City of Gary for the Marquette Greenway project. Both interlocal agreements were presented at the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting, and we have a favorable recommendation for the executive board.
Want me to explain a little bit about this?
Yes,
Okay.
brevity is a virtue.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So before you are 2 interlocal agreements that has been mentioned. These are to secure the local match obligations for the city of Gary and for Michigan City. This is for the Marquette Greenway project, the 60-mile trail from Chicago to Buffalo. This trail project was actually approved for federal funding back in December of 2021 under the RAISE grant, and I'll spare you the acronym. We received nearly $18 million of that. That sounds great. We asked for $23 million. Unfortunately, that $5 million was part, and much of it was our local match obligation. So we've been working pretty much to the last couple of years, reducing the local match obligation for communities, cutting out some projects out of the design scope to make this work for everyone under that $18 million window. So we've come to this point where we have been able to secure enough of a project to present to the Federal Highway Administration, and we have four entities that are involved with this project. Again, the aforementioned Gary and Michigan City. We also have Portage. We also have New Buffalo Township. Portage has signed their interlocal agreement by executive action, and that was the same case with New Buffalo. Both the entities of Gary and Michigan City have requested that the legislative bodies approve this interlocal agreement, hence why it's before you today. And the agreement itself spells out in detail what each entity is supposed to supply NERC in a timely manner, so we are able to pay our vendors and our contractors and so forth for the development of the trail itself. On page 15, you'll see a very tidy breakdown on the bottom of page 15 of how this will work with both entities, where we are asking for different amounts in different years for different phases of the project. Here they are. Within these fiscal years, we're talking about preliminary engineering right-of-way, construction engineering, and being divvied out accordingly. We're hoping that the project itself will be finished by 2027 or 28. We want to make sure that we have all the money in-house. So this is assuring us at NERC that the communities are on board with their commitment of local match, and that is why it is needed to be executed now. We are also in the process of executing a grant agreement with the Federal Highway Administration on this very grant itself. We are not able to execute that grant agreement until these interlocals are signed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for you, Mitch?
Move the approval of the interlocal agreements with Gary and Michigan City.
Second. Motion and second that we approve the interlocal agreements between Michigan City and Gary for the Marquette Greenway Trail interlocal agreement. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I can, who was second? My apologies. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. We appreciate it. We appreciate your presentation this morning, and we look forward to this project. The Personnel and Finance Committee will meet next on October 19th at 8 a.m. See you all there.
Wendy, could you mention about, I believe we're having an exit audit today on finance?
Yes, I wasn't sure how much of the, yes, the The NERC has completed their audit through the State Board of Accounts. Today will be the exit conference at 11 o'clock. So I would expect that will be published within the next, 4 to 6 weeks before they publish it. So we'll have more information on that at our next meeting. Thank you. Council member Carnahan.
Good job.
Technical Planning Committee.
The Technical Planning Committee met on Tuesday, September 12th. The committee heard a presentation from staff on the active transportation chapter of the recently adopted NWI 2050 Plus plan. Staff will continue to present additional chapters of the document at future TTC meetings. The only action for consideration today is for Resolution 2312, Amendment Number 1 of the fiscal year 2022 Unified Work Planning Program for Lake, Porter, and the Polk Counties. The resolution and recommended changes to the UPWP starts on page 24 of your packet, and the Technical Planning Committee recommends adoption of Resolution 2312. Tom Vanderloop will explain this amendment.
Thank you. As you mentioned, the details of the amendment are included in the packet, beginning on page 25. This is a fairly minor amendment to our Unified Planning Work Program, which you will remember is kind of our list of activities that we're going to undertake during the fiscal year, along with the financial resources that will be devoted to those activities. So what we're recommending that we do is just shift some funding around. On page 27 in your packet, there's a kind of a summary of what we're asking to do, and it's essentially 4 actions. One, we want to shift some funding to existing projects to ensure that they're fully funded. That includes the e-commerce sub-area plan and our LPA planning assistance task. We're flexing STVG and HSIP funding into the UPWP. This has already been programmed in the TIP, so we're just amending the UPWP to reflect that. And that will cover our RTIP software contract, as well as a project that we'll be undertaking in next calendar year of working with a consultant to conduct road safety audits. Both of those are already in the UPWP. We're just changing the funding level and the funding source. Thirdly, we're removing funding from a project that will not be implemented. That's the regional traffic signal study. That project was put into the UPWP by the former transportation director, and he's no longer here, and so therefore we're taking that out. We're shifting those funds around. And then finally, we're adding a new project, which is a nonprofit transportation feasibility study. Again, that's a new project. It's fully funded through a combination of our PL funding, which is our planning funds, and a local match being provided by the partner agencies that we're working with on that study. So all in all, this is essentially a revenue neutral amendment to the document, but it is changing some of the work that we'll be conducting next, actually in this current fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, we'll need a motion if there are no questions.
I'll motion to approve.
I had a quick question, if I could. The nonprofit transportation study, so that's going to look at all the current nonprofits that provide transportation?
Yeah, so there are 14 organizations that we have kind of worked with through the past year to develop this scope of work. Those are in Lake and Porter counties. I know that in City of LaPorte, you have at least one nonprofit transportation provider. And so we've left a little bit of wiggle room in the scope. So I think that's something that we can probably incorporate. It wasn't part of the original scope, but I will work with our consultant to see if we can add that in.
Is there any other questions? We have a motion in the second. If there are no other discussions, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Thank you.
Lastly, we'll have an informational update for the adjusted urban area boundaries that will be presented by Grace Kennedy.
Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the 2020 Census Urban Area Adjustment process. So every 10 years after the census has been completed, the Census Bureau delineates what they call urban areas. And to do this, they use a list of objective criteria that can change every time that they do the delineation process. For 2020, they defined urban areas as an area that has at least 2,000 housing units or 5,000 people, at least one nucleus of 1,275 housing units per square mile, as well as the density of at least 200 housing units per square mile. So in this map, you can see the 2020 census designated urban areas. So the census categorizes these urban areas into large and small urban areas. So within NERC's metropolitan planning area, which includes Lake, Porter, and LaPorte counties, there are 3 large urban areas, including the Chicago urban area, the Valparaiso Shore Forest urban area, as well as the Michigan City LaPorte urban area. There are also 3 small urban areas, including the Lowell urban area, the Lakes of the Four Seasons urban area, and the Westville urban area. So, with the criteria that is used to delineate those urban areas, it can often leave the boundaries of those urban areas speckled and jagged. So states and MPOs, in coordination with local officials, may adjust those census-designated urban areas to create an adjusted census urban boundary. This is primarily done because the Federal Highway Administration uses the census-designated urban area definition as a starting point, but then allows for that smoothing and adjusting of the urban area boundary to create a slightly larger area that's better suited for transportation needs. The adjusted census urban boundary does have some rules with how it's created, including that the entire census-designated urban area has to be included, meaning that the adjustments can only expand the urban area, it can't shrink it. The smoothing is the main criteria for the adjustment process. It creates a simpler urban area shape. And overall, the goal is to prevent a road from switching back and forth between a rural and urban designation, which would then indicate that it would switch between rural and urban federal funding sources. It also avoids confusion from those irregular boundaries from that rural and urban classification. So the implications of adjusting the urban area boundary is that it plays a pivotal role in access to funding opportunities. So the adjusted census urban boundary plays a decisive role in that determination of roads being rural or urban, and then is used to determine that funding eligibility for crucial funding categories, the biggest one being the Federal Surface Transportation Program. As I stated before, these boundary smoothing also affects continuity of funding. So it's done primarily to prevent a road from switching back and forth between rural and urban funding sources and avoid confusion. However, adjusting the urban area boundary does not affect the population numbers or the federal metropolitan planning or PL funding levels that are available to local agencies such as NERC. The adjusted census urban boundary is also just for transportation funding purposes only. It is not used for any sort of land use designation. So what did this adjustment process look like in 2010? So NERC approved the adjusted urban area boundaries for the 2010 urban areas in 2012 by the resolution 12-25. So the way that the census delineated urban areas was it categorized those large urban areas as urbanized areas and denoted these small urban areas as urban clusters. So in 2010, we only had 2 large urbanized areas, which was the Chicago urbanized area and the Michigan City LaPorte urbanized area. There were also a number of small urban clusters, including the Lowell urban cluster, Hebron, Shorewood Forest, Westville, and New Carlisle. And one of the major differences from 2010 to 2020 was that creation of that third large urban area, the Valparaiso Shorewood Forest urban area, whereas before, most of the Valparaiso community was included in the Chicago urbanized area, and then Shorewood Forest was designated as a small urban area. So here you can see the adjusted boundary for 2020. We met starting in July with a lot of the communities that are on the edge of that boundary and presented them with a draft adjustment created by NERC staff. We then met with them to see if there was anything that was left out, anything that should be included, and this was the resulting map and boundary that was created. So as you can see, we did decide to include a large portion in between St. John, Crown Point, Cedar Lake, and Cherville to provide continuity there. We also decided to expand the Lakes of the Four Seasons urban area here to include all of Winfield, considering Winfield was included in the Chicago urbanized area in 2010. We also included a large portion in between kind of Hobart, Maryville, and Valparaiso. Again, this area was included in the 2010 adjusted boundary. We also included areas close to Valparaiso and Michigan City and LaPorte that we expect to become urbanized within the next 10 years or so. And that was really our motivation for creating these boundary adjustments, was to align with local boundaries as well as include those areas that are currently urban or may become urbanized in the next 10 years. So just kind of coming back to what our approval process looks like. As I stated in July, staff developed and presented a draft adjustment to the urban area boundaries at the July technical plan committee meeting. And then July through August, staff met individually with those communities that are on the boundary to discuss if there were any other adjustments that were needed. That brings us to where we're at here in September. That staff will make final revisions to the adjusted boundary and then coordinate with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning as well as the Southwest Michigan Planning Commission to adjust the Chicago and Michigan City LaPorte urban area boundaries, as well as submit them for review by IDOT, MDOT, NDOT, and then have those agencies do the final submission process to the Federal Highway Administration. So on October 3rd, staff will present the final urban area boundary adjustments to the Technical Planning Committee for recommendation for approval by the Commission. And then on October 19th, at the Commission meeting, they'll vote to approve that final boundary adjustment. And once that's been approved, it'll be sent to NDOT as soon as possible. And once NDOT has reviewed and approved the final adjusted urban area boundaries, They'll be sent to Federal Highway for final approval by December 29th of this year. And there are any questions? Yes.
Cedar Lake, before the 2000 census, we were rural. And then
Correct.
after the 2000 census, we became urban. What is the criteria for going from rural to urban?
There were a few changes made in the criteria from 2010 to 2020. One of the biggest changes was they didn't consider just population, they also considered housing units and housing unit density. And so that change in criteria may have led to the inclusion of Cedar Lake for this delineation in 2020.
Thank you.
At what point will we see the more detailed maps? For example, Union Township.
Yeah, we should be having those more detailed maps up for review at the TPC meeting in October 3rd.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Grace? It's confusing, but it's got to be done,
Yep.
and it affects the transportation programs for municipalities.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next meeting of the Technical Planning Committee will be Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023, at 10 a.m. at emergency offices. This will take place 1 week earlier due to the date of the next commission meeting. Also, please drive safely and be on the lookout for deer and aware of farm equipment on the roads from now until December. Both deer and John Deere.
And also stop for the school buses when they have their rims out.
Always, always. Thank you. This concludes my technical planning committee report.
Thank you. NDOT.
Adam.
Adams.
Good morning. Those who don't know me, my name is Adam Parkhouse, the Director of Stakeholder Services to the district. Filling in for Matt today, who is at our 2-day statewide maintenance conference in Indianapolis. Plainfield, I think, to be more precise. But I can only mean one thing, that winter is nearing, and so even though that might be a 4-letter word to many in this room, it certainly is to me. We are preparing for it nonetheless, and then we are undergoing truck inspections, making sure everything's in good working order for when the snow flies anytime between, say, tomorrow and January, who can say. We are filling our salt reserves, again, just kind of making sure everything is prepared and ready to go. And we're not caught off guard when that snow comes down. I'm sure all your communities are doing the same. One major project of note that's currently underway, and I wanted to kind of mention in here is you may or may not have noticed that the ramp connecting northbound 65 to westbound 94 is closed, and you might have been like me and thought that that is a thing that we could never have conceived of doing, and yet we've done it. And no doubt, in the impact surrounding that area, you guys have probably felt a little bit of a pinch from that. We appreciate your patience while we've worked through that. We're a little bit more than 2 weeks since the anticipated 3-week closure. As of yesterday afternoon, we were still on track. We have an hour-by-hour schedule that we are being very strict about adhering to. Frankly, for those that don't know, we were faced with 2 different options there. One was the full closure. There's a significant amount of patching that needed to happen on that ramp to maintain the long life of that ramp moving forward. Because of the significant amount, we had 2 options. One was to do the full closure, which we thought we could do the work in about 3 weeks, and again, we're on track to do that. The other option, which we ultimately decided was a little bit less palatable, was to reduce that ramp to 1 lane all the time throughout the day, and then still have overnight closures, full closures of the ramp, and that is going to take somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 months. So given that and the congestion that would no doubt come with that, and the 3 to 4 month headache, we elected to go with the full closure again, understanding that no doubt that's had a little bit of a strain on some other areas. We did take some steps about a week ago to ease some of that by closing Central Avenue to through traffic, because frankly, all the traffic was ignoring the posted detour. I'll pause while you pick your jaws up from the ground. And we were kind of doing whatever they wanted to do, which was primarily going over to Central and using that interchange and turn around. So with cooperation from Lake Station and Gary, who I want to commend here today for their partnership, we were able to do that, get that through traffic closed. So now the traffic looking to use Central to turn around is able to do that in a continuous movement. It's really had a big impact, huge impact to safety. We were very concerned with back a few crashes on both 94 and 65, and we greatly reduced the risk for that. So again, Lake Station and Gary specifically, who were great partners, came to the table with us on that, really linked arms, and it's a tough decision, but I think it was the right thing to do. So with that, that's all I have. Happy to take questions on any topic or comments.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. I've had some complaints or issues that I've heard about, and I'm not asking for an answer today, it's just a discussion, but in-depth bridges and approaches to the bridges compared to other states tend to be, they've noticed, this is coming from some folks I know in the trucking community. I'm not an expert on other states' bridges, but tend to be more of a dip, and had some issues with damage to axles and things like that. So I don't know if there's a difference between our specs and other states, or if there's a chance of looking at that.
Yeah, so I'm not an engineer. I can speak a little bit to this. And, obviously in Indiana, we have pretty intense freeze-thaw cycles. Bridge decks and the approaches to them tend to be made of different materials, which expand and contract at different rates, which, and if there is an engineer in the room, somebody please support me or speak against me on this, but that is certainly part of the reason. Now, are there some things in the spec that can be improved? Potentially. So I work customer services on my team, and we hear a lot of the same things. And I do know that it's something that we're looking at and always trying to get better at it. But I do know sort of the climate, especially in this part of the state, this part of the country, has a little bit to do with that.
Okay, thanks for that question. Thanks.
I am one of those truckers that deals with this and has had numerous leveling valves that level our air suspension systems broken. Recently on US 41, bridges were completed over several ditches south part of Lake County. Brand new bridges, and they all have the same dip, and none of it's gone through a freeze and thaw period at all. We also traveled through Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, Pennsylvania, states with similar climates, and none of them have this issue. So I think this is definitely an Indiana engineering issue. It's a spec issue, and it's the only state we deal with this problem in.
Sure. So one thing I can say is to anybody in the room, frankly, if you come across an issue, if you don't have my contact information, let me know and I can give it to you. But also we do have a customer service board that's really great for reporting specific issues if there is something that really needs addressing. 855 NDOT for you. But again, anybody who's there can always feel free to contact me directly, as I said, what we do. But we can address specific issues to the larger issue. Sure, I do know that this has been a topic of discussion at different levels. Sure. Appreciate that feedback.
Anything else to add? Moving right along. Any other business? Announcements. Bob?
The town of Cedar Lake had a dedication of a dog park Sunday. And it was supposed to be an open house from noon to 3, but rain came, and so we shut it down at 1:30. But we had a citizen come into our town council meeting on Tuesday and thought it was ridiculous that we were charging $60 for a year fee. And anybody that doesn't live in Cedar Lake, it's $75. What I'm asking is, do any of you, the rest of you have a dog park, and do you charge money for it?
We don't charge.
We have a dog park, we don't charge.
You don't charge?
Valparaiso has one, and we don't charge either.
Munster has one, we do charge, and then you're required to have appropriate vaccinations as well.
And dog tax. Yeah. There's a lot of people interested in joining it, and a lot of them didn't know that we had the provision that they needed to get their dogs licensed. And so we're gonna get a lot of people coming in to take care of that.
It's for the health and safety of the dogs.
Yeah.
So,
And citizens that may be around those dogs.
Robert, do you have, like a senior citizen discount?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of seniors that have dogs that probably could not afford that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for telling me what you do.
Any other announcements? If not, our next meeting will be October 19th. It will be an executive board meeting. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn.
Yes, we're right on.